if everything looks good, we're good to go. Just checking to see if I'm streaming right now. So, okay. Um, so as of right now, I should have everything up and running. I think I've figured everything out with the new OBS software. It kind of was a little weird, so I apologize for last week where I wasn't able to show slides. I should be able to show everything I want to show this week. So that's the good news. Yep, and it does seem like it's working. Good. Okay. Um, so we got a couple things to talk about this week, right? The first thing is that I do want to mention that I did post the teams. So go ahead and take a look at the teams, and hopefully it's what you expected them to be, right? If there's any concerns about them, let me know. So start contacting your teammates. Start looking at the introduction and team contract documents. That's probably one of the highest priorities for this week, right? Another thing is to watch the week 3 videos. These are all on social media strategy, social media channels in particular. Sorry, and so take a look at that. There's also a discussion on social media ROI this week on Top Hat. So, and I forgot to post that question, so I will do that right away as soon as I am done with this video. I'm opening up the window right now so I can remember to do that. But I'll have the question up on Top Hat immediately after this video is done. Okay. So then the next thing is, obviously participate in these office hours, which hopefully you're doing if you're watching this right now. And then the optional is to read the chapter 16 and 17. And then there's also a little bit of a fun post that I did where I did an interview a little while ago for a company, Mike.com, on the Instant Pot and just the power of not marketing at all and the power of word of mouth. So take a look at that, check it out, see if you like it. Kind of a bonus little episode this week. On Wednesday, by the way, I am going to be in my live class. I'm going to be hosting Seth Litton from Transact. He's the vice president of digital marketing there. Transact's a company that's based at, they have a big office in the Raleigh area. I'm not sure they're based in the Raleigh area. But they do a lot of work for insurance companies, right? And trying to market insurance products. And so they have a bunch of different projects that they're interested in getting some feedback and insight into. And so I have made those projects available via the email I sent out last week. So hopefully you all got that. I'm going to post the video where Seth talks a little bit more about those projects after I record it in my class on Wednesday. So you should see that sometime Wednesday night. And if you're interested, if your team's interested in working on one of those projects, then you can email me after that and let me know, and I will definitely prioritize that. One other email I mentioned is that one of your classmates actually offered up. She runs a nonprofit called 6 Weeks Sing, and she offered that up as a project as well. So I linked to that in the email I sent out last week. So take a look at that. There were a couple questions, by the way. I think for some reason, I think maybe one of my office hours from last year was still listed, and some of you watched that because there were a couple questions about the beer analytics app, but that was actually one that I worked with last year. Unfortunately, they did not decide not to re-up and are not available this year. But if you are interested, that you may have been watching last year's video. Office hours should always be dated 2020, just in case. That you should see them coming up. Okay. So let's see. Talked about that. Not that. Talked about teams, right? So hopefully you all had a chance to look at your teams. I think most of the teams, for some reason, that were submitted in this class in particular were 4-person teams. So you almost inevitably have another person that I added onto your team because it turned out we have almost exactly, I think it winds up being exactly 9 teams size 5 or something like that, right? There's one team of size 4. Okay, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, we have 9 teams of size 5 and 1 team of size 4. Okay. So double check those, make sure that everything is good and that you have everything set up to start working on your assignments. Okay. Um, Now, last two things I want to talk about today are the um, uh, blockchain reading, which we talked about last week, the and the survey that you did. Okay. But before I get into that, I just want to mention that if anyone is watching live and you have a question, please post it now because there is a delay of a few minutes between when I'm streaming and when you see the post and when I see a post. So as a result of that, I might miss your question if you don't post it right now. Okay. So let me pull up the survey, and I posted these sites up online, but I always like kind of going over this. And let's see if I can go into presenter mode without actually going into presenter mode completely. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. Um, so I posted this up online, so you should be able to see it. But let me see. There we go. So now you should be seeing. Oh, that doesn't quite look right. Let me scale that so that you can see that better. Oh. Always a problem that it's a little too big, so you give me a split second while I move this in, and then I turn myself off so it's not flickering back and forth. Okay, so now you should be able to see. Oh, why is it flickering? Oh, maybe that. Okay. Oh, hopefully, let me see. Let me flip back. Let's see how that looks. Huh, that's weird. Why is it still flickering like that? I'm trying to not give you, you know, make this as more of a pleasant experience if I can. Oh, I think it's because it's just too big for the screen. Let me see if I can make it shrink down a little bit. Okay, that looks good. Okay. Um, Hopefully I won't do that too often. So so this is just kind of, always like to go over these just so you can kind of see a little bit what the different responses are, and so that you can see how similar or how different you are from the rest of your classmates. Now, this is an aggregation of both the online and offline class, but as you can see, almost everyone in the class is majoring in some form of marketing. There is some finance there as well, and some other entrepreneurship and innovation management, but marketing seems to be the primary focus. Um, Most people in this class have not designed a web page or website, but it's close to 50-50. Um, Most people don't have a clue about how to design a website. I like the fact, by the way, um, that even though it's only 51.9% who haven't a clue, 53 who have never designed one, 53.2% haven't a clue, which means there's like 2% of people who apparently have designed a website before but don't have a clue how to do it. So that's interesting to me. Um, you know, most people who have done something in this, I think, have done something in like HTML, Dreamweaver, front page. Sorry, this kind of gets abbreviated. Uh, I believe that and then there's a couple of other stuff along the lines. I actually have used Squarespace quite a bit myself. Wix is a kind of a popular solution as well to help design these things. Probably the language of the kind of the standard languages that most people are comfortable with. The predominant answer is HTML with a little bit of Java or JavaScript along the way as well. Of course, there's a bunch of other languages like PHP and other things that have become more and more popular over the last few years. Most of you have not designed a social media presence beyond your own personal accounts, which is pretty typical. And 2/3 of you say you know what cloud computing is, and 1/3 say you don't. Just to kind of, answer this in the class, I always do this as a live question, but cloud computing is essentially having the capability. And by the way, I should mention before I get into this answer, all these questions were just kind of to see kind of what the knowledge of web technologies was, and I don't really expect you to get them all right or get them all wrong, right? I just kind of use this as a way to kind of level set where the class is going in, so that I have some ideas as to um, how common how these classes are done, right? How much knowledge you basically already have, right? Uh, Pulling up a couple things real quick. Okay. Um, so what is cloud computing? Cloud computing is essentially the idea that rather than using the computer that's right in front of you, your computer connects up to essentially a commodity style computer. And it doesn't have to be a commodity, but most times it is. Somewhere in kind of a cloud that's maintained by, some other server, or you could have a private cloud as well, right? So usually this is like Amazon Web Services or Microsoft or Google Cloud or something like Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, things like that. And ideally, right, in a perfect world, you would just tell the cloud what kind of resources you need. It would find them in your machine, and that's all there is to it, right? And then as your machine needed more and more resources, you could easily scale up. In reality, it's a lot more tricky than that, but that's the basic idea. It's the idea that you, rather than using the computer right in front of you, you're using some storage and some memory or some processing power that's available for you kind of over the internet. What term is used to describe as solving a task by using a large number of people who solve part of the problem online? And crowdsourcing is what I was looking for, and it sounds like there's a lot of answers along that line. I like cloud sourcing. Maybe they were influenced by the last answer. By the way, I always post these answers, but I always keep them anonymous, so you can check out what your classmates are thinking. In what year did the first internet browser become available? The answer I was looking for was 1993, and that was the Mosaic browser. Now, actually, the technology got released to the public, or sorry, the technology got released, or the first web browser was developed in '91, but that was not publicly available, right? It was only really available within the CERN lab and the CERN group, among others, right? So that wasn't quite yet available. What year was the first email sent in the same form we use today? And the answer I have here is 1971, right? And what's interesting is that technology, the 19 so email's been around since the 60s essentially, but it wasn't really until 71 that it reached the modern form that we know of, right? And what's interesting about email is that right now, if you took an email from 1971 and sent it to a modern email server, it would still be able to handle it, which kind of amazes me in some ways, right? That in a technology that's so rapidly evolving, and in a world that's so rapidly evolving as digital technology is, you can take an email from 50 years ago, send it to our modern servers, and they would still know exactly how to handle it. So it's pretty impressive when you think about it. It was usually that to me that's an indication that a system was designed well. What phrase became popular in 2019 on the internet as a way for millennials to state the older generations were out of touch? And the phrase I was looking for was "Okay, Boomer," which is kind of the standard one. And this again, as digital marketing people, right? It's important to stay in touch with what is kind of trending on the internet for most cases, because a lot of times our marketing has to either dovetail with that or at least be aware of it, right? And so that's part of the reason why I ask these kind of questions out there, right? I'm not going to get in the middle of this fight. I'm a proud and fierce Gen Xer, right? We stand on the sidelines and let the millennials and boomers duke this one out a little bit. But it has been an interesting intergenerational war, if you will. An image of what object became the most liked post on Instagram in 2019? Beating out the previous title, which was held by Kylie Jenner. And the answer is an egg. And deliberately it was created just to beat Kylie Jenner, right? So I think that is an interesting answer. And this one, I'm a little bit of a Star Wars geek, as you might realize if you look at the posters hanging up behind me in my home office here today. But though his official name is The Child was the nickname of a character on an online science fiction streaming show, it became extremely popular because it's just too darn cute. And what I was looking for was Baby Yoda, right? Love someone who answers Dennis the Menace, which I didn't know was even on its online science fiction streaming show, but still. Uh, Now this one gets into I always put some of these questions on the quiz because I pay a lot of attention to the American Internet Survey because as I mentioned in some of my earlier videos, right, I believe that your experiences on the internet are really only to be trusted for understanding one person's experience on the internet, and that's yourself, right? That really, in order to really understand most people's experiences, we need to go to data, right? And kind of the joke along these lines that we always talk about is that we have uh, we have um, we have faith in God. All else bring data, right? We trust in God. Sorry, we trust in God. All else bring data, right? And so the Pew surveys I find really well done, and they basically give you a good picture of what people are actually thinking. So if you're ever wondering about like, should we launch this marketing campaign? Is this app that we're about to launch too privacy invasive, right? Like, Pew is a good way to kind of gut check whether or not what the reception is going to be by the American public, right? And so, according to a recent Pew survey, what percentage of Americans think that it is not possible to go through daily life without companies collecting data about them? Now, I asked this question in my offline class, in my in-person class, and 100% of the class said it is not possible to go through daily life without companies collecting any data about them, right? Um, in the Pew Internet Survey, only 62% said that. So there's, something like 38%, if I'm doing the math correctly off the top of my head, of Americans who somehow think you can go through a day in your life without a company collecting any data about you, which I find it kind of amazing that it's that high, honestly, to tell you the truth. Now, according to a recent Pew survey, what percentage of Americans said they're asked to agree to a privacy policy daily? And a lot of times the way these questions are actually phrased is in the last day, right? And so in this case, it was 25% said they were asked to agree to a privacy policy daily. And of course, we got into a discussion in the offline class a little bit, like, well, when I say that it's okay to accept a cookie, right? Does that affect these answers, right? And to some extent, yes, a lot of those are bound together. There might be some that say cookies without privacy, but a lot of them have both of those things together, right? Um, Now, so and if I said last week, I think almost everyone would say 100%. Another thing that kind of is augmenting or affecting these results, right, is the fact that the California Privacy Act, right, was just launched on January 1st, and that specifically um, affected a lot of people updating their privacy policies, right? Now, this quiz is or the survey was done like, I think 3 or 4, and actually, I think the survey itself was done like over the summer. The results were published 3 or 4 months ago. So I don't think, obviously, that did not affect this particular results, but it might be affecting your personal experiences with privacy policy right now. According to a recent Pew survey, what percentage of Americans say it is not acceptable for social media companies to monitor users' social media use? And the question is too long to fit here, but basically it says when they notice that someone is depressive and connects them with counselors when appropriate, right? And in the survey, 45% said this was not acceptable, right? So 55%, most people think this is okay. It's an intriguing question whether in general, Twitter should be monitoring what you post to determine if you're depressed or not. There has been some interesting work done that's been pretty powerful that says that, people who are suffering from chronic depression and they opt in to a social media monitoring service, that there is positive effects that they can have on what they're doing. So I think that that's a powerful tool that actually there's some positive results from that. And you might say that sorry about that noise, but you might say that that seems very powerful in many respects, right? Now, it's interesting that those people opt in, right? But there has been some sort of interesting studies that have shown that it reduces self-harm in those cases. How many hours do you spend on the internet a week? The vast majority of people said more than 20, right? Almost no one said less than 2. There were a couple of people who said 2 to 5, and a couple of people said 6 to 10. I feel like I need to, I've been doing the survey for about 10 years now. I feel like I need to start gradating more than 20 into like more than 20, more than 30, more than 40 or something like that, right? To get a little bit more resolution on what's going on now as things get older. Um, at what age did you start using internet, right? Like it seems like I'd have to do some work to actually calculate the median or mean, but it seems like it's somewhere in the range of 7 to 9, right? From what I've seen. Um, I've been on the internet myself since 1991, thereabouts, 1980, depending on how you count it. I was on BBSs and bulletin boards before that, but I was older than 7 at that point. Let's put it that way. But the internet basically didn't really exist before then, so that's what it came down to. Do you have a Twitter account? About most of you do. Do you use Pinterest? Most of you do, right? Most of you do not. Sorry, I should say. And that's a number. The Twitter account number has been going up as I've been doing this survey. Pinterest number has gone up and down over the years, right? Personal Facebook page, 86% say yes, they do. That's actually probably at one of the lower numbers I've recorded over the last 10 years. And of course, we talked a little bit, and I probably mentioned this in one of my videos, that every year someone reports that Facebook is dying, and every year, right, 95% of people between the ages of 18 and 39 are on Facebook, right? So it varies on a fairly regular basis, but it seems to be constantly in use, right? Do you use Instagram? 63% said yes. That's probably at an all-time high for this survey. Do you use WhatsApp? And I've heard that these numbers are artificially inflated because at least in the offline cast, they're actually required to set up WhatsApp so that they can communicate. So that might be a little bit of a distorted number nowadays, but still interesting. And apparently there's like one person who doesn't have a LinkedIn account, right? So I don't know if you're an MBA student without a LinkedIn account. That's kind of intriguing. TikTok, not a lot of people there yet, but that's the up-and-coming platform, right? And you actively contribute to Reddit. Again, another more up-and-coming platform, but not a lot of people active there. Where do you learn about current events? This number, I think, has shifted. It used to be that almost everyone, in the last few years, almost everyone was answering something like social networking sites or things like that. But there seems to be more and more of print newspaper and the radio and professional aggregators, right? That kind of space, right? I do like some of the answers I got down later on, including my husband, I think is one of my favorites. How often do you check your email during the day, right? Most people are saying every hour. I feel like I should maybe switch this again to being like, every 10 minutes, right? Or something like that. I'm a bulk emailer, by the way. You'll see me all month. I'll check my email every couple hours during the day, but then I won't actually respond to most emails until I have a set time that I sit down and do that. How often do you text? Again, starting to get up there. About 20% of you said more than 30 times a day. With a large group in the 15 to 30. So the majority of people are texting over 52% of the time, right? So 52% of people are texting over 15 times a day, right? It's quite interesting how that number keeps growing and growing and growing. So that's it that I want to talk about for the survey results. You can find those results up online. Let me put back up my camera. Boom, boom. You can find all those slides up online already. I put them up there and made them available, so you should be able to find them up there. Okay. Now, the last thing I want to talk about today is blockchain. So let me pull up that. And I added a new reading this year because I really like the AMA reading that I've been assigning for only a year, I think. But I also added a new one by my friend Anita Gross up at NYU, who wrote in the Harvard Business Review about how blockchains can help out students or help out marketers. Wow, talking too far ahead. This is the problem when I'm trying to pull up the slides at the same time I keep talking. I thought it was a really good little article, and said a lot of the same things the AMA article did, but maybe got into a little bit more detail about the actual applications that might come out of it. Put my slides. Okay. Windows capture. Let's turn it on. Turn it over to the blockchain articles. Give me 1 second. Almost done here. Okay. And turn that. There we go. Okay. So you should be seeing the blockchain slides now. So what is blockchain, right? Now, there's been a lot of talk about blockchain and cryptocurrency recently. Let me turn off my background video just so it doesn't cause any distractions. Um, and, but there's not a lot of discussion as what it is. And I really like what AMA so Inindo also has these like key characteristics of blockchain, right? But blockchain is an irreversible, public, fully verifiable ledger. Uh, and Nindo talks a lot about how it allows for pseudo anonymity, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So he puts that one other characteristic in there. But what makes it irreversible? Irreversible means that you can't modify or change anything once it's been added to the ledger. Public means, right, that everyone can access it. And fully verifiable means that there's actually something you can do to determine if a modification that was made was actually an accurate modification. And ledger means essentially the way we've always defined ledger, right? That it's something where you can record pluses and minuses, transactions in and out of a particular system, right? So this is used a lot for cryptocurrency, where I create a set of cryptocurrency, right, and then you can record withdrawals from that cryptocurrencies or additions to that cryptocurrencies, right? Old blocks are never deleted, and new ones that are added are done so permanently. The ledger does not belong to anyone, right? It just exists, right? That's the interesting thing about the blockchain ledger, is that if I have the ledger a copy of the ledger on my computer, right, then you can have a copy on your computer, and someone else can have a copy on their computer. And the only way we can add to that ledger is by submitting, in most cases, by submitting something called a proof of work. There's some technologies that allow something called a proof of stake as well, but they essentially allow us to add content to that ledger. The nice thing about that is because it is kind of impossible to manipulate or augment or change in any way, it can be distributed in its entirety so everyone can see it. Also, it's possible to figure out who added a block, and that block can only be produced by one person, right? A new transaction. And it is a ledger that it does record all transactions. Now, is it anonymous, right? Well, yes and no, right? So essentially, in order to add a block, I have to log onto an internet device someplace in the world, right? And I have to use a name to add a block to that ledger, right? But it doesn't have to be my real name, right? And it doesn't have to be my real location. I can kind of do it from wherever, right? As long as I can justify the proof of work, right, then I can add on to it. However, it is public, right? All that information about where I logged into from and what my name was, for instance, whatever name I chose, that's all publicly available, right? And if it's not publicly available, right, like if let's say I put a fake email address or something like that, well, then in most cases, the ledger is not useful to me anymore, right? Because if I put a fake email address, right, then I can't really get my cryptocurrency out of it, for instance, my blockchain, my Bitcoin, right, out of it. So I have to provide some sort of identifiable information to make it useful to myself, right? Now, it can be that I do that through, 15 reroutable configurations and make it very hard for someone to track down who it was that actually did it and how they did it, right? But it is possible to do that, and it can't be completely anonymous. But it allows for somewhat pseudo-anonymity. Now, marketers could use this for a number of different things, right? So, for instance, there's been a lot of concern about supply chain problems, right? Like organic and fair trade goods. Do I know that these are really organic and fair trade? Well, if I have these kind of stamps all along the way where people stamp that they actually bought this good from this location and this good from that place, I may be able to track it back down to the original person. Now, it still requires me to trust that original person, when they said, yes, I am an organic farmer in Ecuador, right? that they are actually an organic farmer in Ecuador. But at least now I can understand the provenance of where the good comes from, right? Fakes versus counterfeits, right? Like, do I know that this purse I'm buying is actually the um, authentic kind of purse, or from the right fashion house, right? Do I know that something on Amazon, right, which has a problem right now in this Amazon marketplace with a lot of counterfeit goods, do I know that that's real, right? Well, if I'm given a blockchain ledger that traces all the way back to the original manufacturer, and the original manufacturer has an authentication code that says that yes, this is mine, right? There's assuming that everything that the crypto hasn't been hacked, that the company hasn't been hacked, right? Then theoretically, I now have almost perfect proof that that good is a real good and not a counterfeit, right? Um, so it can improve trust that consumers have in marketed goods, right? Um, and then it talks a lot about for advertisers, right? So this could allow new forms of advertising, right? So cost per click is kind of the standard on digital marketing, because I know for a fact I can kind of see that someone clicked to my website from your website, right? But there would be nice if they could do things like cost per sale. Like, imagine that if you display an ad on your website and someone comes to my website and makes a purchase, I were to give you money back. In a lot of cases, I were to pay you more than I'd pay for just the click, right? In the past, that wasn't done very often because there wasn't enough trust between the publisher, right, and the advertiser. So the advertiser could fake the fact that you made purchases, right, and then ask for more money from the or fake the fact that there were less purchases and then pay the publisher less, right? But with a blockchain record, right, we could guarantee that these purchases were made appropriately, right? Will the consumers actually adopt, right? And that's a good question, right? And this is something the AMA gets into. Do consumers really care about this information? Oops, typo in there. Fix it real quick on the fly. Do consumers understand the trust componentry of the blockchain? Do they understand why it allows them to trust? Will this only be adopted by the really rich who really care about where their products come from, right? And I think those are all fair questions, and I'd be interested to hear your responses. Now, you could go back to the Roger 5 characteristics and try to think about it from that perspective. Does it have a relative advantage? Does it have compatibility? Is it too complex, right? Is it observable how people are making these transactions, right? And how easy is it to try it out, right? I consider myself fairly cutting edge, but really the only way I've used blockchain so far is in my cryptocurrency transactions, right? So obviously, as of right now, I don't think it has much adoption in the marketing space, right? It'd be interesting to think about, are there ways to convince people to try it out in the marketing space? So that's kind of my thoughts on cryptocurrency. Now I want to bring up some notes from what I heard, from what Kimberly found when looking through the results that people had posted. Um, so, um, Jen Callahan said that trust is critical in marketing, and blockchain provides variable information. For consumers, it's a new opportunity to quickly and easily verify marketing statements. I think that's true, right? Like, trust in marketing, trust in advertising could be verified at a much higher level. This could allow the companies to actually charge higher premiums, right? It could allow for a product to show that the companies are doing the real thing, right? And in a world in which blockchain becomes more universally adopted, right, it may allow those companies that really are selling at higher levels to sell at a bigger premium. It might also allow, if you think about it, a little bit more of intermediation, right? Because now you could imagine that rather than having to go just to, like, say, some high-end fashion store like Gucci or Ralph Lauren or whatever, right? I could buy from a secondhand retailer because I could look at the blockchain to verify that they're actually coming from that. Jen goes on to say that it creates an opportunity for marketing distribution itself, right? And this is talking about how it eliminates third-party advertising distribution channels to create a verifiable chain of ads, right? So this is an interesting point that I didn't talk about, but right now, a lot of times, like, a ad company, an ad network might have to exist to verify the transactions between the retailer and the publisher, right? But, if we can disintermediate that in this case, right, and allow them both to verify via the blockchain, that might improve those kind of things. Well, customers care about blockchain. Nicholas Consolo says that it's maybe a little too early, right? The reactions to all the stuff about Bitcoin has been both negative and positive at times, right? It's led to a lot of confusion about it. And they may eventually, especially he suggests that maybe in the advocacy space, right? For instance, the eco space and sustainability space, blockchain may come around as being the number one target. And the ad targeting aspect of it, as he mentions, that might cut both ways, right? There's a lot of people who think that ad companies are already targeting too much, so that might be a problem. Trey Lewis says blockchain's not going to mean much to the average consumer, right? They've read about both in this class and a fintech class, and is still confused about the application. Doesn't think people will gain the businesses. If it does become part of a norm, he says, he thinks that it will then become required by almost all businesses, because businesses that don't use it are going to use a trust factor to it. It may eventually become the norm, but it'll be a while. And, you can imagine, I love this idea. He talks about it may be a status item for them to say that their source of coffee only comes through a verifiable blockchain barista, right? I love that idea. Like, you go up to buy at your local Starbucks, and they're like, here's our blockchain to prove that this particular Americano that we're making you comes straight from a reliable vendor. I love that idea. Rebecca Simonowski says that blockchain can also help marketers with increased transparency in combating things like click ad fraud, which we'll talk about later in this class. It'll allow those marketers to more easily earn consumers' trust, and customers will also care if it helps them be removed from being bombarded with marketing and advertising. So this is an aspect, right? Like if blockchain allows me to more narrowly target my advertising at you and make sure that the ads that you're being seen are relevant, that might be something that would improve trust in advertising overall. And finally, Manohar Rana says that blockchain can help marketers by providing a trusted platform that eliminates or reduces the possibility of fraudulent activities by marketing, right? Customers will care about it because trust and transparency are inherent properties of the blockchain network. A marketer would be notified whenever his advertisement is posted on a website by a marketing agency, and then he could easily verify and track where that content was, so that he knows whether or she knows whether or not that content is being made available in the proper locations, and that he's earning the proper amount, he's paying the proper amount for it, or earning the proper amount from the publisher side. Yeah, so those are the main comments I got. Most of those highlighting. I like some of this. I like the blockchain barista. I don't know how soon, how far away we are from blockchain barista, but hopefully that'll be coming to your Starbucks soon. Anyways, that's about it I have for this week. Just to recap what I said at the top of the hour, right? Let me turn off that flashing. Hopefully it's not flashing too much. Flashing video. The things to be working on this week include watching the week 3 videos, 1 to 5, which talk about social media strategy, right? Social media strategy, right? No, social media channels, right? Participating in the discussion on social media ROI on Top Hat, which we'll discuss next week in the week 4 office hours. Watch now the week 2 and week 3 office hours, obviously, and participate next week in the week 4 office hours. And start working with your team and start working on the introduction to team contract documents. And then the optional assignment is to read over Chapter 16 and 17, and check out the little video I did on Instant Pot and the power of not marketing at all. Okay, that's everything for this week. Thank you all for being here, and hope all is well. Take care.